The Dutch Grand Prix takes place at the Zandvoort circuit, and after an absence of Formula One drivers racing down the track for 35 years after being excluded from the F1 calendar, it reopened in 2021. In this video, we'll find out what might be the reason for the dangerous circuit being cancelled from the F1 calendar for so long. Welcome to F1 Inside. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video and hit the notification bell icon to get updated about F1 and really get inside the culture of today's most popular racing sport, its drivers, teams, tracks, tragedies and history. Let's start with some numbers, shall we? As of 2022, the Dutch Grand Prix has been held 31 times since its debut in 1950. The circuit is 4.2 kilometers long, which takes F1 drivers 72 laps to reach the obligated 305 kilometers in a Grand Prix. Ferrari is the most successful team here, winning a total of 8 times. F1 driver Jim Clark won the most Dutch GPs with 4 wins. The track is named after the town where it's located, Zandvoort, a city in the province called North Holland. Zandvoort is a coastal town, located in the dunes of the North Sea coastline, and not too far from the country's capital city, Amsterdam. In the 1930s, some minor races took place here when it was hardly a circuit, but the German invasion during World War II inhibited the Dutch from racing here. The development of the track actually started during the war when the Major of Zandvoort convinced the Germans to let his citizens build roads through the dunes on which the Germans could hold victory parades. It was a brave attempt of the Major to save his citizens from being transported to work camps in Germany instead. After the war, some roads were broadened and linked together, which was the birth of the Zandvoort circuit. To this day, it's still quite unclear who designed the track. Some say the Royal Dutch Motorcycle Association did it. Still others claim it was the Dutch circuit engineer and one of the first directors of the Zandvoort circuit, John Hugenholtz, who designed it. The first racing event occurred in 1948 as the Zandvoort Grand Prix and was won by Thailand's Prince Bera in an old Maserati. 1 year later, in 1949, Ferrari won for the first time on Dutch soil with driver Luigi Villaressi. Then in 1950, its name changed officially to the Dutch Grand Prix, and the first 2 years were non-championship Formula One races, with Louis Rosier winning both. In 1952, Formula One officially recognized the Dutch Grand Prix. In 52 and 53, the Italian Alberto Ascari won the races. Shortly after, the circuit experienced its first financial struggles, resulting in the GP not being held in 1954. And even though 1955 did have a Grand Prix, 56 and 57 didn't. Financial difficulties made it impossible to host the Dutch event, and some say it was due to the Suez Crisis. In 1958, Moss won the GP in his Vanwall car. In 1959, the Swedish driver Joe Bonnier won the only F1 race in his career in Zandvoort. But when the Dutch circuit and its organisation wasn't dealing with financial controversy, it had to deal with crashes and sometimes even death. In 1960, when Dan Gurney had an accident, a spectator was killed by the F1 car, which brought much bad press to the Dutch track and the sport. In the years after, Jim Clark would be the dominant force, winning 3 times in the 60s as he drove a Lotus 49 with a brand new Ford Cosworth DFV engine introduced in Zandvoort. This was the beginning of an era, and the engine was considered one of the best until 1985. But then, another tragedy happened. In 1970, as Piers Courage, driving for Frank Williams, crashed near the dangerous Tunnel Oost corner, a wheel came off his car and hit him on the head, instantly killing him. To make things even worse, the car caught fire and with Courage still in it, burnt down to the ground. Public opinion started to get a bit more pessimistic about the dangerous track from the Netherlands. And at one point in 1972, F1 superstars Jackie Ick and Pedro Rodriguez refused to drive in Zandvoort due to the dire conditions of the circuit that weren't up to Formula One standards. Despite the redevelopment of the circuit, another scary incident happened due to the organization's lack of communication and blatant mismanagement. During the Dutch Grand Prix in 1973, as Roger Williamson was racing his 8th lap, he also crashed near the infamous Tunnel Oost, which resulted in his car going up in flames while sliding upside down on the tarmac at high speed. Even though Williamson was uninjured from the crash, he couldn't free himself from the car he was caged in. His friend and fellow F1 driver David Purley stopped alongside the track and ran across to the burning vehicle Williamson was in. Purley, however, couldn't flip the car on his own, and what made this incident even worse is that the marshals weren't wearing flame retardant overalls and decided to stand there. Watching the horror unfold, the race officials even threw away the fire extinguisher Purley used to stop the flames. And as Purley was trying to get help from other drivers by frantically waving at them as they passed, none of them stopped. They thought Purley was attempting to put out the flames of his own car, not knowing another colleague was still caught in the fire. The race continued at full pace while Purley was still desperately trying to save his friend's life. But sadly, it was in vain. Williamson died of the heavy smoke that caused asphyxiation. Purley was awarded the so-called George Medal for his heroic actions. Legendary Jackie Stewart won the race, but needless to say, nobody was celebrating it with the tragedy that had just taken place. In 1974, the legendary Niki Lauda won the Dutch Grand Prix in his Ferrari, but in the years after, his biggest rival James Hunt won due to, as some say, the fact that Lauda didn't even race because of him recovering from his infamous crash at the Nürburgring. 1979. Another controversial incident in Zandvoort, as Hunt and Andretti were dueling and eventually colliding in a way that showcased the dangers of this track even more. They both couldn't finish the race. With all this controversy around the infamous Tunnel Oost, the organisation of Zandvoort decided to place a chicane near the tunnel designed to slow down the cars here. Nonetheless, Villeneuve and Jones still crashed here, and even though these weren't fatal accidents, it proved that this part of the track would lose its function in future Grand Prix. These dangerous incidents must have had a role in closing the circuit in 1985. The company running the track, CNAV, went out of business, and half of the track was sold to Venderodder, a bungalow park developer. They redesigned the way and used it for other types of motorsports. Then, in 2019, the hearts of F1 fans in the Netherlands started beating faster, as it was announced they were redeveloping the infamous Zandvoort circuit to apply for F1 in 2020. But with the global pandemic taking place, the reopening was postponed. Maybe it was destiny, as the hero of Dutch F1 fans, Max Verstappen, took his first World Championship in 2021. The year the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort officially was on the calendar of Formula 1 again, but now without the infamous Tunnel Oost. And even though Zandvoort has a dark history of horrific incidents partly due to mismanagement, Zandvoort is now home to thousands of Dutch F1 fans rooting for their own world champion. So what do you think of the infamous Dutch circuit Zandvoort? Do you think it deserves its spot on the F1 calendar? Would you still want Tunnel Oost to be part of the track? Leave it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get updated about everything that's F1. We are F1 Inside, and thank you for watching.